good morning, Elizabeth Orton Jones.
Good morning, Miss Potter.
Well, our children love your story of Twig. She's such a lot of fun. How did you go about writing this story?
Well, I used to live near Chicago in the suburbs, and we used to take an elevated train into the city. It was way up above the ground, and this elevated train used to go around what we called the loop. The tracks would make a loop up in the air, and you could look down as you got near the city into the backyards of houses which had high fences around them. And there would be rows and rows and rows of these houses with stairs up the back, the way you see at the front of Twig. And one day I was riding into the city to do an errand, and I looked down into one of these backyards, which didn't have any grass in it at all, and it was set up just the way Twig's backyard was. And I saw a little girl sitting on the bottom step of all the steps that went down the back of that building. And I wondered, what is that little girl doing? What is she playing? What is she thinking about? And will she stay here by herself all afternoon? Will she have fun even though she is by herself? And then the train went on into Chicago. Now, on the way home from the city, I came along the same track and looked down into the same backyard, and here was the same little girl sitting on the lower step. And by the time I got home to my own house, which was, more than an hour away ride from the city, I was beginning in my mind a story about that little girl that was sitting on the bottom step. And while I was working on the story, I got on that train and rode to Chicago, in and out from the city to the suburbs, I don't know how many times, maybe 100 times, to get the feeling of what it was in that backyard. And I saw the little girl many times again, though I never knew her.
Well, now, this is what we wondered, too. How did you get the name of Twig? Where did this come from?
Well, I wanted the name of the little girl to be a symbol of the story, really. And I remember the day that I was naming her, I wanted to get a word for a very small thing. And it would be something like a pebble, or a grain of sand, or a whisker, or something very something that we think of as a very small thing. And I simply opened the dictionary and went through it. And pebble was one of the words I considered. But I don't know. I suppose there could be a little girl called Pebble, but I ended up calling her Twig, which was more to my liking, because twig is a growing thing on a tree, and I wanted the symbol to be something that was growing, which Twig was.
She certainly was, and Twig just fits her. It's just the perfect.
Of course, that was long, long before the name of Twiggy that we know now was ever invented.
You were there first with it. Did you find a sparrow's nest with all those things like a Noah balloon and a toothpick and safety pins and a little flag in it?
Well, I tell you how that happened. That was a real nest, and it goes along with what I was just saying, that we don't get everything in the same place at the same time. There probably was a sparrow's nest in that backyard in Chicago, but the nest I wrote about and wanted to write about was in my own backyard, on my own drain pipe, where I lived. And it wasn't a sparrow's nest. As a matter of fact, it was a robin's nest. But it happened this way. I had just finished another book illustrating it. And this illustrating of a book is something that takes weeks and weeks and weeks, sometimes a year, sometimes more than a year. And during that year, you are working with papers, and you are cutting and trimming papers and painting, and you have paint rags and Scotch tape and thumbtacks and everything all around the studio. And when you finally finish the book, then you want to clean up your studio and make everything neat again so that you can begin on the next book. So I came to the end of this book, and a friend came over and helped me clean the studio. We swept and we put things into dustpans, and we dumped all of this in cans out in the alley. And it happened to be springtime, about the month of May, the way it is now. And who should be watching from the tree but Mrs. Robin? And she thought, this kind of thing, these colored strips of paint rag and thumbtacks and Scotch tape and string and all of that, that is just the material for my nest, and I'm going to build a nest the like of which no robin has ever built before. And when she got that nest finished with the long strips of paint rag hanging down and Scotch tape to hold the nest together and thumbtacks were in there, it was very near my window so that I could see it all, and little pieces of pencil that I had worn down to little short nubbinses and different things out of my studio. Mrs. Robin finally finished the nest, and then she laid eggs in it, and then she would sit in it with her tail up there, looking so proud of that nest. And it became so famous that the children from the grammar school down the alley would come in classes with their teachers down the alley and stand there with the teacher pointing to see Mrs. Robinson on her fancy nest.
Well, now how about the tomato can? Was that a real thing then?
Oh, yes, the tomato can was real, and I had to think what would be the most likely thing. You see, the point was that this little girl in the backyard had nothing to play with. That is the whole point. And it is, I saw as I looked down into the yard, an old can near the fence there, and I thought, that, why not take that? That is a very humble symbol, I think, in our whole life. Everybody throws away cans. It was something that nobody else wanted. And so I decided that a tomato can would be a fine house for a fairy. But actually, I got a can. In fact, I think I went down cellar and got one and opened it and ate the tomatoes in order that I could have this thing. And I actually made a mistake with a can opener so that I could see how it worked. And then I collected things which might be found in an alley for the furniture. Bottle top and toothpaste tops and Mrs. Sparrow's feather. And had them and set up the table inside the house and made perfectly sure that everything would work.
Mm-hmm. And well, the furniture was marvelous. It's a whole new trend. We could make furniture that way today, for our dollhouses from this. Well, now how about the way Twiggy looked? We loved this, for instance, when you had her shoe tied on with a piece of grocery string, and you even had this in a picture when she was lying up on the leaf after she became small.
Well, it was simply that I thought very hard about all the parts of her costume, and for some reason or other, when I'm doing a book, when I'm writing it and illustrating it, I don't want just to make up the way a thing was. I have to see that it works and have the real things, just like a little stage setting there. And I remember I went down to the thrift shop because I wanted old. I knew that on Saturday she'd wear her oldest shoes. And I bought a little pair of sandals which would fit that age of a girl, brought them home, and this sandal had one of the buckles off, and that's where the idea came that it was tied on with string.
Now, how about the dress? Did you see one like this?
I made a little dress out of an old piece of cloth and put a patch on it and put the rickrack on it. And then as I went along in the book, in order to know absolutely what twig would do and how it would be at times, like lying on the dandelion leaf and sitting in the doorway, I made a big dress for myself.
Oh,
with a patch on it and a safety pin. And I made big old shoes for myself by taking one of my own sandals and taking the buckle off. And I would, as I wrote, this is a silly thing, but as I wrote, I would wear this dress and I would be Twig.
Whatever happened to the tomato can and so forth? Did you throw them away when you were through with the book?
Well, no, the tomato can, the actual tomato can, and the bottle top and toothpaste tops and all the paraphernalia went on the road with people who were giving exhibits of books.
Oh.
The children up at Mason School now have the can and the background and all of the paraphernalia. And whenever they read Twig, the teacher brings out this and they're able to see everything.
That must be really thrilling.
And one very funny thing happened last winter. I took the little scene up there. I had it up there for some classes of children before, but I wanted to give it to them because I was through with it. And so it was in the attic, and I had to go up in the attic and get it out in order to bring it to school. And everything was there in apple pie order, but what do you think? Remember the stick of gum bridge?
Yes.
And the wrapper of the gum with the mirror. Well, up in the attic, the mice had eaten the stick of gum bridge, and I hadn't seen, maybe my Siamese cats saw this happening. I have never seen a mouse chewing gum. Have you?
No.
This I would love to see. And they ate the whole stick. And everything was there except the stick of gum. So I told the children about that, and that Twig and Elf couldn't go across the bridge over the stream of drainpipe water unless they had the stick of gum. So somebody, one of the children during the night before the next day, was kind enough to buy a stick of gum and present it to Twig, so I hope it's still there. But I've always loved that picture in my mind of the mice up in my attic, maybe 24 or 25 mice all sitting there chewing gum for all they're worth, eating up Twig's stick of gum bridge.
Well, now some of the books that you have made, you've done the pictures for, but you didn't write the story. Now, one of these was Secrets by Jessie Orton Jones. Now, Jessie Orton Jones was your mother, right?
Yes, she was and is my mother.
Oh, she is still living.
Oh, heavens, yes.
This is wonderful. Now, are you going to write another book for us?
Yes, I hope to write many. I have many ideas that are
wonderful.
Up in the attic at the moment.
Well, it's been very, very nice talking with you, and you have some wonderful things to tell us. So we do thank you.